Hey guys, welcome back to the Quick Sip, and I know this episode itself is gonna gain a lot of interest ever since I start posting about this hint of an episode since yesterday on Instagram. So, before we start, here's a disclaimer to everyone that this episode discusses a real criminal case involving manipulation, extreme belief system, and the death of a family member. No graphic details will be described. Listeners' discretion is strongly advised. This episode is not meant to sensationalize violence, but to examine how belief, when left unchecked, can become dangerous or even deadly. There are crimes driven by anger. There are crimes driven by greed. And then there are crimes driven by belief. Belief, my friend, is powerful. Belief gives people hope. Belief gives meaning. But belief, when mixed with fear, ego, and control, can also erase empathy, silence logic, and turns love into obedience. Today's story didn't happen in a dark alley. It didn't happen in isolation. It happened inside a home in Toa Payoh, a flat just like any other, a housing estate. And the most frightening part, the killer didn't think he was doing anything wrong. Before we talk about ritual, beliefs, or violence, we need to talk about who these people are or were, because this was not a broken home in a way people expect. The Toa Payoh case did not involve a loud, chaotic family. It involved a quiet household, living a mostly inward life. At the center of it was a father, a man in the late 30s, early 40s at the time. He was not wealthy. He worked odd jobs, struggled to hold a long-term employment, and had a long history of drifting, both professionally and personally. People who knew him described him as soft-spoken, withdrawn, deeply insecure, but increasingly certain of his own spiritual importance. This wasn't a man who commanded with force. He commanded with conviction. Now, let's talk about the wife. The wife was much younger than him, in her mid-20s. She did not work a high-profile job. He was largely dependent on the household structure. Those who later described her as quiet, compliant, non-confrontational, emotionally fragile. She wasn't known to argue. She wasn't known to exert herself strongly. And this matters because I couldn't stress this enough. Manipulation doesn't target the loud. It targets the gentle. She wasn't unintelligent, but She was conditioned to defer to authority, to certainty, to someone who claimed to know better. And lastly, the victims were young, primary school age, still at a stage where adults are the truth, parents are protection, instructions are not questioned. They were described as normal children, obedient, quiet, non-rebellious. There is nothing about them that suggested defiance, and that obedience, which society often praises, becomes a vulnerability. So, there was no reports of constant shouting, no neighbors recalling violent arguments. The household routine was simple: staying indoors, limited social interactions, minimal visitors, increasing isolation. Here's the thing: isolation is important here, because when a family stops checking reality against the outside world, the loudest voice inside becomes truth. And in this home, that voice belongs to one man. Now, at some point, the father stopped being a husband, a provider, a parent, and became a messenger, a chosen one, a spiritual authority. This is where the danger begins. Once a parent claims divine certainty, every instruction becomes sacred. You no longer disobeying a person, you are disobeying truth itself. So, the question is that people always ask, why didn't she leave? Why didn't she stop him? Because by then, she wasn't a partner anymore. She was a follower. Years of emotional dependence, spiritual fear, and repeated reinforcement had done their job. She believed questioning equals danger, disobedience equals punishment, trust equals survival. This wasn't love. This was a psychological submission. Here's the most unsettling part. The father, he did not see himself as violent. He saw himself as responsible, burdened, carrying knowledge others could not understand. In his mind, he was the only one willing to do what was necessary. And that belief that you are the only one brave enough to act is how ordinary people justify extraordinary harm. And again, this wasn't a dysfunctional family by stereotype. No drugs, no gangs, no observed abuse history. It's simply just isolation, authority without challenge, belief without boundaries. And that's why this case matters. A father had begun exploring spiritual beliefs deeply, not casually, not as comfort, but as absolute truth. He believed he had been chosen, that he had received messages, that he alone can interpret signs others could not. And once a person believes they are chosen, everyone else becomes secondary. Ladies and gentlemen, this did not begin with murder. That's important. It began with rituals. Small at first, prayers at fixed hours, rules about silence, restrictions about food, movement, behavior. Nothing illegal, but everything controlled. Control, it's how manipulation starts. The family didn't obey out of fear at first. They obeyed out of trust. Because when belief is framed as protection, disobedience feels like danger.
If we don't follow this, something bad will happen.
That sentence spoken enough times that it becomes law. So, let's pause here for a while and step into his mindset. A father was not acting on rage. He was methodical, calm, certain. This is what makes belief-driven crime so dangerous, because he believed, number one, pain was purification. Number two, suffering was necessary. Number three, resistance was corruption. So, in his mind, he wasn't harming his family, he was saving them. This is called moral inversion, where harm is redefined as virtue. Once that switch flips, there is no internal alarm left. So I want you to imagine a setting at home, within a family, a conversation that happened that we are not supposed to hear. As the wife says, quietly but unsure, "Are you certain that this is what we must do?" The father, steadily, he replied, "I have been shown. Doubt is how we fail." The child, "Why do we have to stay still?" Hearing what the child said, the father replied, "Because stillness is obedience." There wasn't any shouting. There was no chaos. Just authority, spoken softly. That is how control survives. It doesn't scream. It reassures. As days passed, the ritual intensified. Not because the voices demand more, but because nothing felt complete anymore. When belief doesn't bring relief, it demands escalation. And eventually, the father crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. The family members did not survive. Not because they were strangers, but because in his belief system, they have become symbols, obstacles to purification. Authorities discovered the scene after concerns were raised. The father was arrested. During interrogation, he did not deny his actions. He explained to them, to the officers, "That's chilling. That's disturbing." He spoke in spiritual language, in justifications, in purpose. In court, psychiatric evaluations reveal severe delusional thinking reinforced by belief. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, with caning and depending on charge classification at that time. The family was gone. Again, not because of hatred, but because belief erased boundaries. This case isn't about religion. It's about manipulation using religion. Any belief system, religious, spiritual, ideological, becomes dangerous when one person claims exclusive truth. Questioning is punished. Obedience replaces consent. Fear replaces compassion. This applies to families, cult-like groups, toxic leaders, even modern online echo chambers. Young or old, no one is immune. The moment you are told only I have the truth, you are no longer safe. Belief should comfort you, not control you. Faith should protect life, not justify harm. And love should never require obedience without question. The Toa Payoh ritual case reminds us that the most dangerous weapon is not violence, it is unchecked conviction. Because when we believe turns deadly, it doesn't feel evil. It feels righteous. This has been the Quick Sip. If this episode makes you uncomfortable, good. Discomfort is where awareness begins. Stay curious, stay grounded, and never surrender your conscience to someone else's certainty.
You've been watching and listening to the Quick Sip podcast, hosted by Harry, available on Spotify and YouTube podcast. Subscribe, like, and follow all our social media networks.